Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today, Yevamot daf Ayin Hey. We are going to begin on Ayin Hey Amud Aleph, the third line from the top. Utlasa Kroy B'Truma Lamali. Why do we have three psukim when it comes to the din of Truma, which we've learned, which is a distinction between Meiser and Kachim? When it comes to Truma, you have to wait until not just going to the mikvah, but also Erev Shemesh, you have to wait until Seitz HaChachavim. So, Lamali, why do you have three psukim? So Rashi says, "B'kodshim lo yoichel ad asher yitar, v'okmino el minei b'truma hakos medaber." We said that pasuk is actually talking about truma. Davar sheva b'zar shel Aaron. This is something which is equivalent to all Aaron's children. Hubo hashemesh v'taher ad molosime tahara. So why do we need these psukim? So the mi ad asher yitar. If we would say this pasuk, lo havi yadana. Bama kasam Rahman lo havi yadana bama. We wouldn't know what this is referring to. It says Rashi Ezuhi Gomer Taharaso Dealkocha Gomer Tahara Mashma. So therefore kasam Rahman ubo Hashemesh v'taher. So the pasuk comes and tells you that it's by when the sun sets. That is the form of being pure. Because Rahman ubo Hashemesh, you would think Hani Mili Dela Bar Kapara. Maybe the only time you can start eating truma is when the sun sets, but it's because you're dealing with something which is la bar kapara. For example, if a person saw only two riyas, not three, which would require carbon, or a mitzar musker, or someone who's tummy sheretz. So all these different situations, you would maybe think that since you don't need to bring a carbon, that's the reason why you can eat truma. Davar kapara im adamaisi kapara. Maybe you actually have to wait till you bring a carbon to be able to even eat truma. Kasar rachmana ad melois. So ad melois means that, says Rashi, if you yoledes the bas kaparahi tahara be'er shemesh. That even when a yoledes, a woman who gives birth, who has to bring a carbon, nonetheless she's allowed to eat truma once the that night has passed, once it's that night. You would think you could start eating truma right away, even if you didn't go to the mikvah. No, you actually need to go to the mikvah, which will mat you to eat meiser, but also you have to wait until the sun sets. So that is the reason why you have three psukim to clarify that in all situations, once the sun has set, then at that point you're allowed to eat truma. Now there is a Tana that disagrees. The Omer bezav bal gimel reiyos umitzar muchal kasam adaber, that the pasuk is actually talking specifically about individuals that do have to bring karbanos. V'hai adasher yitar ademaisi kapara. So the pasuk would actually maybe think that only once you bring the carbon can you eat truma. So trei kroy b'kachim lamali. So then why do you need then two psukim? So sricha diikas rachmana b'yoledes. If you would have the pasuk regarding a yoledes, that again she has to bring a carbon and then only afterwards she can eat kachim, yishum demaruba tumasa, because her days of tuma are long. This is actually one of the questions here. Mahuatzat. This is question 9. Mahuatzat hachamura. What is the place where we see we're more strict when it comes to yoledes over zav, and ma'otzad hachumra the zam yoledes. Lafikach itzrach kra b'tervayu chad etanu lo'oisim b'kachim adim ma'isi kapara. Why do you need two psukim to say you can't eat kachim until a kapara is brought, until the carbon is brought? So again, if it only mentions by yoledes, maybe you would think we're strict because meruba tumasa. Says Rashi, shmeinim yoim lachilas truma v'kachim. You actually have to wait 80 days. If we're talking about she gives birth to a girl. Oval bazav emelo. When it comes to a zav, which is not such a long period of time, so it's 7 days. So maybe that's the din is maybe we're more lenient, and you can even eat kachim even before the carbon's brought. Now the truth is, v'ikas rachman bazav delo huter mechloloi. Oval yoledes emelo tzricha. What does that mean? So Rashi says shiro adam, that when it comes to a zav, if let's say you see dam, we never find that it's mutter. Utaharu labala. So, but that's when it comes to her. If she sees dam, it's possible that she can be mataher to her husband. As long as it doesn't stop, he sees zav, he becomes tameh. Let's just see how it's read over here in question 9. Yoledes merubatu masa shmoinim yom lachilas truma b'kachim zav l'hutamachol mashentin yoledes hutra b'mei tahar. During the days of purity, shara dam, if she sees dam during her pure days, mutar salbala, then she'll be mutar to the husband. Okay. Therefore, that's the reason why you have it mentioned by both. Svicha. Now then the pasuk says, "B'mayim yuva v'tamei ada erev." No lumali. Now this pasuk, says Rashi, where say is talking about truma, and when it comes to even after the tefillah of a kli, it's still tamei by truma. So the question is, why do we need this pasuk to tell it when it comes to a kli, that you also have to wait until you have erev shemesh to be able to use the kli for truma? So the Gemara asks Lomali, so Rav Zera v'negia. The pasuk above is actually talking about achila, as it says v'yacha yoichem and akadshim. This pasuk is, Rashi says, is pekelim ishtoy. It's talking about vessels. The negia ba'almahi, it's touching. V'ashmin and kli b'hu adin lo adam tful yoyim lo yiga b'truma. So it means that lo yiga b'truma can't even regarding to touch truma. The sign of a tameh yachol akoil, when it says that it's tameh in the pasuk v'tameh b'mayim yuva v'tameh afal achar b'yasmayim kor tameh. So therefore, it says the Gemara. So it says word v'tameh yachol akol Talmud lemer v'taher v'taher yachol akol Talmud lemer v'tameh haketzad. So what exactly is this coming to tell you? So in other words, when are you able to use it? Is it necessary to wait until Erev Shemesh, or even before that? So on this, Gemara answers, as we know when it comes to also eating, Ketzad kan l'maiser kan l'truma. When it comes to maiser, it's mutter even once it's immersed. By truma, the negia is usher until Erev Shemesh. Ibachana, say it the other way around. Maybe we're more strict by maiser. So Mastabra Kihech the Chamira Chila, the Truma Mechila the Meiser. We know that we're strict when it comes to the eating of Truma over the eating of Meiser. Again, Meiser, you just have to wait till you went to the mikvah, and then you can eat Meiser Sheni, but you can't eat Truma until that night. So Achanam Chamira Negia the Truma Negia the Meiser. We'll say the same thing. It's a very simple answer. V'imoy Seima Negia the Truma Mahacha Nafka. Actually, the notion of touching truma with this kli is learned out from this pasuk. B'chol kodesh lo siga, azhar lo oichel o enu el neges. The question is, is it hard to eat or touching? Talmud b'chol kodesh lo siga. The pasuk says b'chol kodesh lo siga. Then it says vel mikdash lo savai. So machash kodesh lo mikdash. Ma mikdash davar sheish bo netilos neshama. The only time this pasuk is talking about going in has to be when you go into the base of Mikdash while you are the status of being Tameh. In that situation, there's an Isser course, as Rashi quotes the pasuk, Minechorsa ki es Mikdash Hashem Timeh. So a person is not allowed to go into the base of Mikdash in that state. And if a person does, that's Netilas Neshama. So Av Kodesh, Davar Sheish Bo Netilas Neshama. When it comes to Kodesh, it has to be referring also to Netilas Neshama, and but again, Netilas Neshama Leika. We know that touching is not going to make it, you're not going to be chayiv karis for that. Only when you eat it. It says Rashi, Dahainu achila, betuma shehu gabi kodesh bekaris. If a person eats kodesh at that state, then you're going to be chayiv karis. But with truma, a person eats truma tame is b'misa, b'meis boy ki chalu. That's a chayiv, you're chayiv misas b'dei shemayim. Not be the Adam, of course, but nonetheless, we're talking about this connection, and it has to be eating. This pasuk must be talking about eating. So why is it b'chol kodesh lo siga, touching, when it really has to be talking about eating? Hachid kamer negia kachila, that touching is like eating. Says Rashi, ha'asel echel asel iga. Anyone who's asked to eat is also not allowed to touch it. But it doesn't obviously mean that you're chayiv kares in that situation. Okay. Now the Gemara goes back to our Mishnah, Psuadaka. So when it comes to a Psuadaka, that individual who has this mutilation, physical ailment, problem with their body, is not allowed to enter into Kahal Hashem. And these people are not able to have children, which is one of the primary reasons for this. So, and because of that, the Mishnah said, as we go all the way back to Daf Ayin, I believe, so they are actually still allowed to eat Truma, because they're still good Kohan, they're Kohanim, they just have this problem, and because of that, their servants are also allowed to eat Truma. However, their wives are not allowed to eat Truma because they're not allowed to be married. So therefore, if they had Bia with this woman once they were married, so she becomes puzzle through having Bia with someone who was a puzzle. However, if let's say the Mishnah says Vimul Yada, if let's say they didn't have Tashmish, Mishinasib Tsuadaka, so let's say they got married and he wasn't a Psuadaka, wasn't a Karshacha, and then after their marriage he did become this, but he never has Tashmish with her, so at that moment she's still allowed to eat Truma, because she didn't become possible with Bia. Okay, and then it discusses what exactly is this case of a Psuadaka Karshavcha. So in this the Mishnah says, Kol shenivtzu habeitzim shelo, if his testicles were crushed, feel achs mehed, even one of them, and that's one. Ukrashavcha kol shenichras hagid, if his gid, the male member, was cut. If there's some remaining at that part of the body, then he's okay. Okay, this is going to be explained at greater length over here. Suadaka. So Mantana Mishtameres Labia Psula Deraisa. Who's the Tana that says, let's find this Rashi over here. Who's the Tana that says that Mishtameres Labia Psula Deraisa, says Ochla? Says Rashi, the Katani Imo Yoda, if let's say they didn't have Bia, Mishanasa Pasua Daka Hari Elu Yochaylin. So this woman's allowed to eat there. Avagav the Mitzapil Mishtameres Labiaso. I mean, she's gonna probably have Bia again with her husband. So this is a situation that even though she's Mishtameres Labia, this woman, right? This woman who's married to this guy, nonetheless, even though she's married to someone who's apostle deraisa, this Karshacha, that she could still eat, right? So he can still eat Truma. So who says such a thing? Which I mentioned. Actually, b'machlokas shenuya. This is actually based on a machlokas, which we had previously in Daf Nun Vav. Rabbi Lezer, Rav Shimon, Rav Shimon he. Rabbi Yochanan Omer. Fine. What is this referring to? Let's look at Rashi. So if you have a case of an almano kohen gadol, grusha b'chutz kohen hedget, so which is a chavi lavin. So mina erisin. Lo yoichel b'truma. Once erisin is done, they're not allowed to eat truma. Rabbi Lezer, Rabbi Shimon machshirin. However, it's a machlokas. So why? So let's say, for example, she is a bas kohen. Doesn't make any difference. Or let's say she's a bas Yisrael. So mina erisin lo yoichel b'truma. Already from erisin, she's not allowed to eat truma. Again, this is actually a woman who is a bas kohen. So the question is, she could eat truma de beinasha from her father, but now that she's engaged to this person who's apostle, is going to be invalid marriage. At least it's going to be somewhat problematic, because the Chavi Lavin, the Machlokas of Kushi Toif is Chavi Lavin, but the Yoichel B'Truma, at that state, she could eat. What do you mean? He's eventually going to do Nisu, and he's going to have Bia with her. So this is a case of Mishtameres, another situation, Mishtameres would be a Psul Deraisa, and yet we still say Achla. So it's a similar case. Where it says a field tamer Rab Meir, even according to the shita of Rab Meir, Shani Hacha Shekvar Achla, because she already ate, right? Since she already ate, so therefore we're going to be lenient. He doesn't subscribe to this. The fact that she was able to do so before, let's say as a bas kohen, that doesn't matter. The ilo temahachi basishin kayin who mays. Let's say you have a bas Yisrael who marries a kohen, and that kohen dies. So umeis bala. So taichel. So she's allowed to continue eating shekvar achla. Of course not, right? The reality is she's not, and she has no kids. So the fact is she was able to eat because she was married to a Kohen. But now that her husband died, obviously she can't eat anymore. What do you mean? Why don't you say shkvar achla? Shkvar achla is not a svar. B'yochanan hasam paka kinyane. Hachla paka kinyane. It all is totally different. When it comes to that situation, of course, a Bas Yisrael who's married to a Kohen and the Kohen dies, that Kinyan is gone. She's not married to him anymore. So of course she can't eat truma anymore. However, when it comes to, for example, being married to an Almano Kohen Gadol, B'Shas Erison, so in that situation, we allow her to continue to eat truma at that stage because she already was eating and the Kinyan did not get removed. Okay. Eza Patsua. So Tanoban. Eza Patsua Daka Kol Shinivtsu Beitzim Shalo. So we said that and this is, I think, the exact same lashon as we just read on Daf Ayin. So it's a situation where Kol Shipatsua Beitzim Shalo. Yeah, when the testicles of this man were physically crushed. Fine. V'afilu achs mehen, same thing as our Mishnah, even one. V'afilu nikbu, even if, let's say, they were pierced. V'afilu nimoiku, even if, let's say, they dissolved because of some type of an injury. V'afilu chosru. And Rashi says, koshu, even if it's missing a little bit, not the whole item, but even a part of the beitza. Rabbi Shmuel ben Shel Rav Yochanan ben Broika, Shemaiti mepi chachamim beKerem b'Yavna. I heard from the people in Kerem b'Yavna. Rashi explains that Kerem shahayoshim shurais. They sat in rows, kikerem, just like a vineyard. Hanatu shuros. That's why it's called Kerem b'Yavna. Kol she'ein lo el beitza achas enu el sris chama v'kosher. So someone who has one beitza, he's like a sris chama, and he is kosher. So the question is, Sris Chama Savadaitach. So Sris Chama, says Rashi, Ha Sris Chama bidi Shemayim machmas choyli, v'haylav choylihu. When it comes to a person who's sterile in this way, it's bidi Shemayim, because he was sick. This is not a choyla, he's not considered to be a sick. So Ella harihu kasris Chama v'kosher. It just means that he's kisris, he's not a sris, but chama, because a sris chama again is bidei shemayim. And we're going to see when it comes to sris chama bidei shemayim, we'll see psuadaka bidei shemayim, which is when he became this way naturally. He was born that way, so we're going to say it's kosher. So the reality is it's not a sris, but he's kisris chama kosher. Nikiv. If, let's say, he has some type of puncture hole, lo moilid, we're saying that individual is not capable of having children. But who garbed it? So, like with Dikwa, there was a person that was going up on a tree, as we continue Ayin Hayim at base. The charze silva, the beitzim, and the semen oozed out. V'nafik mine kechut the mugla v'oilid, that even though this happened, which obviously means there was this hole, says Rashi, nakvu kites bebeitzav, a thorn of the tree somehow went into his body, and the shechva zera came out. And Rashi says, kamin lecha, fil hachi, holad basar hachi. He was still able to have children. So how could we say this is true? So Hashalach Shmuel Kamei Rab Yarmulei, he said, say v'chazer al banav me'ayinheim. Go and inspect those children from where they came. It says Rashi, Zanse Ishto. Say, oh, look, he has all these kids. Yeah, they're probably not his kids. But suadak b'dishamayim kosher, as we said, is because he became this way naturally or was born this way. So suadaka b'dishamayim is kosher. Okay, says Rashi. It's alidei ra'amim ubarad o mimeimai. Again, if let's say he was born this way, or it happened in some form naturally, so therefore he is kosher. Amra b'hainu de karinan patsua v'lo karinan hapatsua b'masnisa tana nemer lo yaba patsua. It says a person who's a patsua daka cannot come to Kal Hashem, but nemer lo yaba mamzer malham b'di adam avkan b'di adam. So just like a mamzer is bidi adam, right? Because it was through a physical action. So too, the only time it's aser is if you became this way bidi adam. There's something that happened in the course of your life. However, if it happened through birth, in that situation, you would not be possible. Okay. Amar Rabba, Batsua Bekulan, Dach Bekulan, Chorus Bekulan, Batsua Bekulan. So what is that? Batsua Bekulan, when it comes to someone's Batsua, again, as crushed, Bein Shenifsa Hagid, Bein Shenifsu Beitzim, Bein Shenifsu Chuti Beitzim. Doesn't matter if you injured the gid itself, the Beitzim, or the Chuti Beitzim, the cords to the Beitzim. Dach Bekulan, Ben Shenidach Hagid, Ben Shenidchu Beitzim, made Shenidchu Chuti Beitzim. Same thing, if they were crushed, it doesn't matter what part. Any of these injuries to any one of these organs will disqualify. And for that matter, Karos Bekulan, when it was cut, it doesn't matter. Ben Shenechor Hagid, Ben Shenechor Su Beitzim, Ben Shenechor Chuti Beitzim. Amrle Hahumar Rabban Rabba, Mamai Dehai Patsua Daka Ba'oisam Makoim. How do we know when we talk about Patsua Daka, it's referring to a male member? Maybe it's actually talking about there's some injury on the guy's head. So Amalei Medaloi Manale Beidoros Shmamina Ba'oisam Makom. The fact that he can't have children, so it doesn't mention it's also for how many generations. Why doesn't he say how many generations he cannot enter the Kahal Hashem? Obviously, it's ba'osa makom, and the problem is that he can't have children. Maybe the reason why it doesn't mention how many generations can't come into Kahal Hashem, the iluhu da aser, maybe only he's aser, b'rei kosher, but for whatever reason his children, grandchildren kosher. No, dilmer de kroshavcha, ma kroshavcha ba'osa makom, avhai now ba'osa makom. Kroshavcha is definitely talking about the male member. Maybe it's talking about his lips. No. Shavcha ksiv. It says shavcha. But makom sheshayfich, a place of where it pours. Shaises, Rashi says. Ve'ema michaytmo. Maybe it's his nose. You can have a drippy nose, so it pours. So miksiv b'shafuch Karus shavcha ksiv. Misha al yedei krisa shayfech. Only through the drips only happened because it was cut. Shloi de krisa eno shayfech. However, it doesn't get cut, it's not going to drip. So elam mekaleach. So the fact is, it can't be talking about a nose which drips because it can drip anyway. However, it's only talking about something that would normally not drip, and if not for the fact that it was cut. Okay, it pours either way. Okay. So you can actually just learn it out, just like a mamzer is ba'oiso makoim, from having tashmish, that's how you produce a mamzer. So too, it must be when it says Patsua Daka, it's also referring to an injury on oso makoim. Nika v'lmata mi'atara shekenegdoi l'malo mi'atara. So it says, let's say there's a hole on the bottom from the atara, opposite above the atara. So Savar Rabbi Chia Barabba Lachshuri, Samuel Rabbi Yasi, Hachi Amar Rabbi Rishon Levi, Atara Kol Shehim Akevas. Any part of the atara is ma'akev. All right, let's see if maybe there's a couple questions here. Okay, question 10. Nermal yavo patsua daka lo yavo mamzer. Man nilma the gemara in the patsua daka min asamach lo mamzer. So what's the connection? So patsua haina ba'oisam makam v'loy b'safasa. It's not his lips, for example, because it's obviously oisam makam. Or the patsua b'di shemayim mutter the lav dumid mamzer hu. It has to be something which is only bidi shamay, bidi adam, but not bidi shemayim. Bidi shemayim would be kosher. Okay. Let's see a couple more questions. TA 28. Ma hadin patsua daka bidi shemayim. So this we have beferish over here. This is TA 28. That the patsua daka is kosher. Patsua daka bidi shemayim is kosher. But he says Uma makro is that. So we learn out because we're talking about, because it's next to a mamzer, and a mamzer is dafka b'di adam, so it's only if it's b'di adam. TB 29. Masdisin v'imlo yada mishnasa patsua daka hari elu yochelu masvar diishlo mediochelu afilu mandi ermer mishtamer slabia psua lo achla. So the answer is the shani hachash kvar achla, as we said, because they're already eating the truma, so therefore we're just going to allow it to continue. That was TB 29. Okay. All right. No more questions, so let's just finish up this daf. Fine. So it says that the im nishtayir ma'atara. So the Mishnah said, let's go back to the Mishnah, make sure we say it correctly. All the way back to daf ayin. So it says, if let's say there's remaining from the atara, feel kachut hasaira kosher. Okay. So Yosef Rabbeinu v'kemiboyle melo hachut she'amru, when it says that even like this a small amount, al pnei kula, all the way around, or al pnei ruba, the majority. Amalei rava toisval Rabbeinu melichut al pnei ruba, the majority. Ukalapi reisha toward the top. Amar Rav Huna kikulmus kshera. If let's say it's cut like a quill, then it's also going to be kosher. However, in the event that it is cut kimarzev, like a gutter, which has a hole in the middle, then psul, then that will passel. So hai sholet ba'avira, v'hai lo sholet ba'avira. One is able to cause air to go through in, and one not, says Rashi. So kach afal gav she'ein rosh hagid noigeh mipanav mischamim hu machmas negias acharav. East Yamar Kukulmas Gora Shechva Zera Mimei Isha Umoitzia. Okay. Fine. Varav Chista Oimer Kemar Zev Ksher Kukulmas Psula. Actually says it the other way around. Hai Gorid Vahai Gorid. One is drawn out of the body, and one is not drawn out of the body. Rabbi Kavasid Rav Huna Mastabra. Hailu sholet ba'avira, v'hailoi sholet ba'avira. It's all totally if it's sholet avir, if air can go in. Imishum gridusa, if you want to say, how about the fact that it's drawn out of the body? So media havi barza de chavisa. It's comparable to like a stick in a barrel. Okay. Weiter. Amar ulei ravina lameimar hachi amar mar zutra mishmei de rapapa hilchasa. The halacha is bein kekulmus bein kemarzev kshera. If it's cut in any of these two ways, it's still kosher. Miu miboyle lamata miatara olamala. The question is it at the bottom, below the bottom of the atara or the top? Pshita lamala matara. It's the top. These lamata miatara feel nichos hagid nami. That even if the gid is kosher, even if the gid is cut, it's kosher. V'Ravina was bushe la meimar hu deboy, and Ravina to confuse Meramar is why he did this. However, there was a story to Havi b'mas Machasya that happened in the city of Machasya, and Shafi Marbar Rav Ashi kekulmus, that it was cut the flesh comparable to a kulmus bi'achshrei, and they said it was fine. Hahu uvda the habib humadisa is tatim gufta, and this tube was closed up. The shechva zera the apik b'makim katanim, and it went b'makim katanim. Says Rashi meraglayim. Says Rashi, what is this referring to? Guvna shnei nekavim ba'adam. Now this is an interesting shot. It says there's actually two holes in a man. Echad moitzi shesen, ve'echad moitzi shechva zera. V'nehem keklipas hashum. There's like a small membrane. So he said, like where a person urinates, they don't. Shechva zera doesn't come out. Okay, so this is how they understood it. So katanim and apik b'makom katanim. So the shechva zera came out of where the urine came out, basically. So sabra bibi barabai lachshuri. So he said, it should be kosher because it's not a psuad, it's not a daka, not karshocha. So Rapabi mishum the asu Just because you come mimuloi from a cut-off place, says Rashi, mimishmacha umlo mebeis Eli, because Eli and his descendants, the klala of Eli, because of Chafni and Pinchas, is that they were not going to live a long life, which included Abai and Rava, who were the descendants of Eli, even though they learned Torah and did Chesed, so they lived relatively long lives, 40 and 60 respectively. Amrisu mili muliasa. You're also going to say cut-off words. Bimkaima mibashla. Shalom bimkaima lo mibashla. If it's in its place, literally it cooks. Not in its place, it doesn't cook. Basically, what it means is the Shechma Zera only has the capacity to produce children only if it comes out of the right place of the Gid. However, if it's not coming out of the right place, then it will not be able to produce children. Ad kan.